Have we reached a tipping point in the gender wars? So 6 years ago, comedy writer Graham Linehan, the man who created hit sitcoms such as Father Ted and Black Books, was cancelled for standing up for the rights of women. But have things actually got any better? Well, I'm delighted to say that Graham Linehan joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Graham, you've obviously been on the show before and your case has been very well publicised, but just in case anyone's watching who doesn't know what happened to you, what happened?
Well, I just noticed women being bullied online and in physical space as well, and I started objecting to it. I immediately started losing work.
And this was just on Twitter or social media?
Yeah.
Just making that point.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I had what I thought was a bit of a kind of safety net in the Father Ted musical, which I saw as my pension.
Yes.
And finally that was taken away too by my spineless colleagues, I'm afraid.
I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? Because, Father Ted, one of the most famous sitcoms of all time, the musical, a surefire hit.
Yep.
Still hasn't been produced.
Yeah.
Still being held hostage by Hat-Trick Productions, who are the people who have the rights, yeah?
Yeah. It's because it's a combination of things. It's because they're terrified of activists. They have activists within the company, and they don't have enough interest in the women in their lives to investigate the issue. It's an insane situation.
And one of the things that's been so surprising in your case, I mean, obviously I've read your book, Tough Crowd, which is brilliant. What I love about it, it's mostly about comedy, about the craft of comedy. Mm-hmm. You also talk about what ultimately happened, is that people within the comedy industry, the supposedly the most creative people in the world, didn't come out and defend you, or even suggest any, or give any signs that they were curious about these issues.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary thing. I mean, I've seen Armando Iannucci this week, who was a colleague of mine. I worked on a couple of shows he did, and I appeared on the Alan Partridge show. And, I've said many times to him that I've been cancelled, I've lost my livelihood. Why do you ignore all this? Because he's one of these people who seems to think that cancel culture doesn't exist. But I'm kind of like a living example of it, and he just kind of breezes over it. And it's because that it's hard to explain, but they simply do not want to address this issue. And if they acknowledge that I exist, they acknowledge that the issue exists. And they are pretending, people like Armando, people like Rufus Hound today, they are all pretending that this isn't an issue.
Are they just afraid that it might happen to them as well?
I don't know. I think it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of fear. I genuinely don't think they have enough curiosity or empathy with women to actually look into the issue. They seem to think that women's rights, as people like Alistair Campbell often say, are a culture war issue. We've seen it reach its apex, really, in that this week, and for 10 days, I think it is, we've seen men hitting women, punching women in the boxing ring.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of what I'm curious about now. Is this as far as it goes, or is it going to get worse?
So that's a really good question, isn't it? With a male individual winning gold in the boxing at women's.
Oh, no.
There's two.
He won a silver, did he?
So there's two medalists who have an intersex condition, which is not the same as a trans issue.
They don't necessarily have an intersex condition. They've just said they have.
We don't know, do we? Because no test results have been released or anything like that.
This is something I spoke about today with Dr. Emma Hilton, who I know you know, who is a biologist, and she's worked with a lot of people with DSD conditions. And the whole DSD question has actually been brought up to further muddy the issue, to confuse people, to make people think that this poor woman is being so terribly hard done by, and all it is a smokescreen to cover up that a number of women were punched in the face over the last 10 days by men in the boxing ring, and an audience of millions just watched it happen.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned Rufus Hound, who just tweeted out, "This is a woman. Stop complaining."
Yeah.
If this is a woman, why does this individual have XY chromosomes? Has he even asked that question? Is he interested?
That's a really good question. No, I think there's a lot of people, and I have a word for them, and I think it's shared by a few other people, NPCs, which is the name for when you're playing a computer game, all the people you meet who aren't human beings.
Yes.
Now, that's not to say, I don't want to take away Rufus's humanity, but he is behaving from a set script. He is just reciting things he has heard from other people. He is trusting that his fellow non-player characters are telling him the truth. And of course, they're all either lying or they simply don't know.
So, but as you say, the spectacle of someone actually being punched, a matter of physical safety now, can this be the tipping point? I mean, judging from this week, it looks like not.
Yes, but I think there's some things to be cheered up about. First of all, I just wanted to make sure people know, a man punches a woman it's something like 146% times harder than a woman can, you know? So a woman could actually be killed in the ring. And the great thing about this week, even though you see the usual obfuscation, the usual, you know, useful idiots like Hound and Laurie Penny and people like this, Seb Coe, he may be the next Olympics. He may take over from the lunatics who were running it this year. If he does, he said something like, I have daughters, of course this is an interesting subject to me. And I think he was actually very, very shocked by what happened over the last 10 days.
Well, and we've also had, for instance, Wes Streeting saying he's going to implement the cast review.
Wes Streeting is another good example, yes.
So, you know, although there's a lot of resistance within Labour, they still haven't apologised to Rosie Duffield. But are you optimistic now that this kind of, with the cast review, even though so many people are denying that it even matters, ultimately, sometime in the distance, the truth has to win out?
Yes, it does. But I think the major problem at the moment is that the BBC has so little authority. It used to be the gold standard in terms of news. We look to the BBC to kind of make sense of the world. And the BBC only The Guardian is as dishonest as the BBC in reporting on this issue. Sorry, The Guardian and Pink News. They
Pink News goes without saying.
But like the BBC is actively trying to suppress the information around this issue. They're actively trying to confuse the public. And they are, I genuinely think that when this is all over and there is what do you call it, an investigation, I can't remember the word, but an investigation is a whole affair. I think the BBC has to be investigated too, because they have let this all happen.
Well, I mean, they claim, I mean, I actually contacted the BBC to ask why they hadn't covered the WPATH files, for instance, you know, and they just came back with some boilerplate about how, well, we can't cover every story was effectively... What do you make of that defence? Do you think that's fair?
Well, I'll tell you what, that defence might make sense if the WPATH files didn't reveal that the entire edifice of trans healthcare is built on sand. You know, these are a bunch of ideological lunatics. The head of WPATH wasn't even a doctor. And most of all, and I know I go on about this, but it's one of those things that I still can't believe isn't a massive scandal.
Yes.
WPATH linked to a page full of child pornography about castration.
Yeah, this was the eunuch files.
The eunuch archive.
Yeah.
It was something like 5,000 erotic short stories about castration, and 40% of them were marked minor.
Yes.
So that's 40% of them are about castrating children. So the organisation that's saying we should castrate children is also linking to a website for men who are turned on by the idea of castrating children.
And because that sounds...
How is that not news?
And people will say that's incredible, can't be true. So I would just alert them to WPATH version 8, Standards of Care.
Yes.
The draft version, which they uploaded, had that link in it.
Yes.
And this was all reported by Redux magazine.
And it also included eunuch as a gender identity.
Yes.
And when the WPATH files came out and Redux reported on this, they removed all this from the website immediately.
So they knew there was an issue there.
Yeah.
All right, well, Graham, thanks so much for joining. I want to just finally mention your book, Tough Crowd. Just how's that been going?
You already did.
Oh, I know, but I think you should mention it again.
It's going okay. It's going okay. It's hard to find in bookshops because the people who run bookshops don't want it to do well. So if you do want it, I would say go to Amazon or any kind of online dealership.
Fantastic. Graham Linehan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.